Okay, so amongst all the Ukraine cartel talk and everything else, Doge and everything else going on right now, there is that little thing called the budget of the United States of America, and it's gigantic. The question is just how gigantic is it going to be? Joining me now, a great senator from the state of Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, apparently there are two different budgets. There's a House budget, there's a Senate budget. What do the budgets look like? What one are you supporting? What are we dealing with here?
First of all, thank you for focusing on it. So let me just give you some numbers. Washington, D.C. doesn't like talking about numbers very much. So in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. Then we went on a pandemic spending spree, averaged $6.5 trillion over the next 5 years. Last year, we spent 6.9. This year, we're on track to spend $7.3 trillion, 61% more. Now, Jesse, no American family, if somebody got ill and they had to borrow $50,000, and then that person got well, they wouldn't keep borrowing $50,000 and keep spending that level. That's insane, but that's exactly what the federal government has done. So now we've got two budget resolutions working through, one through the House, one through the Senate. What the Senate has done, and I appreciate Chairman Graham's efforts here, he's taken one of my options. I've given people four options for a pre-pandemic level of spending. Won't go into the details, but he chose President Trump's budget for 2025 using this year's Social Security, Medicare, and interest. That totals $6.061 trillion. That is the Senate's budget resolution. Now, there's a lot of things we need to do to actually bring spending down to that reasonable pre-pandemic level spending. What the House is doing is they're starting from basically what we're spending today, $7.3 trillion, and they're experiencing what I would call death by 1,000 cuts, because nobody wants to cut anything in Washington, D.C. So what you have out of the House budget budget resolution is literally something saying that they're going to cut up to $2 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but over 10 years, that's $200 billion a year. So they would go from 7.3 trillion down to 7.1. Again, the Senate budget resolutions is $6.061 trillion. Now, let me just throw one other thing in here. If you looked at Trump's spending in 2019, that was $4.4 trillion. If you increase that by population growth and inflation using today's Social Security, Medicare, and interest, that'd be $6.5 trillion, basically $800 billion less than what we're currently spending. But the House is saying all they can do is spend $200 billion less. One final comment. I don't think anybody who voted for President Trump believed he would continue spending at President Biden's levels. So I hope President Trump takes that into account. He told us down Mar-a-Lago a couple Fridays ago that he wanted to balance the budget. Well, the only way we're going to balance the budget when we're bringing in somewhere between $5 and $5.5 trillion of revenue is we better get spending down closer to the Senate version, which is $6 trillion. I'd go further. If you take Clinton's 1998 total expenditures, grow it by population growth, inflation, use today's Social Security, Medicare, and interest, that'd be $5.5 trillion, virtually balance the budget. That's where I would start. All these members always talk about zero-based budgeting, right? They're not serious about it. I'm proposing a pre-pandemic baseline of spending, and everybody's throwing up their hands going, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't cut that. I keep reminding them 3/4 of the word can't is can. Used to drive my kids nuts. That's true. We have to do this. But we need presidential leadership. We need the President of the United States to say we are going to dramatically reduce the size, scope, and cost of government. Now, he's doing it through Doge, but in the end, Congress has to, through a reconciliation process, actually reduce spending on the mandatory accounts other than Social Security or Medicare. Those are off the table in my figures. This keeps spending Social Security, Medicare at the same levels, and you could set the budget somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion, at a minimum $800 billion less than we're currently spending. I know it's a lot of numbers. It's actually pretty simple. Achieving it's going to be a bear.
Yeah, I guess it got a little bit more complicated today. I did see that the president came out and spoke lovingly of the House one, and dislike the Senate one. Now, numbers aside, that means there's something in that one he loves and he doesn't find it in the Senate one. I'm assuming, what is it that Donald Trump loves about the House one more than the Lindsey Graham budget, as it's known as now?
Well, he believes all of his tax cuts that he ran on as a candidate would be included in that. There's no guarantee of that. The bad thing about what the House is doing is whatever we do in terms of taxes would not be permanent. They would expire, just like the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I mean, that was a real problem with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Their provisions have already expired. Everything other than the C Corp rate and the tax provisions for only 5% American businesses expire automatically 2026. Let's not make that same mistake. That was a massive mistake. Let's not do that twice. I mean, learn from what mistakes we made last time.
Senator, can you explain to those of us who aren't in this room, we don't understand how this works, it does get complicated. Okay, the Senate has a budget, the House has a budget. How does the budget get decided then? You guys have a game of pickleball to work all this out? How does it work from here?
Well, this all dates back to the 1974 Budget Act, sets up this process that allows us to reconcile the budget, actually pass legislation without the 60-vote requirement in the Senate. So it makes majorities able to pass things without Democrat support. The budget, in the end, can be completely meaningless because all the budget does is sets up goals and then instructs the committees to go about and pass legislation. But you can pass the legislation with 51 votes. So there's no guarantee that we'll actually hit those budget targets. I, as a business guy, I'm trying to change that dynamic and actually make the budget the way Americans use it is like limits, where no, you're not going to appropriate more than what we put in the budget. From the mandatory accounts, which is the only thing it can impact through reconciliation, the committees of jurisdiction, the authorized committees, have to change those programs so we don't overspend on those amounts. But again, I'm laying out the total budget, 6,000 lines of it, and the committees will then have to go do the work and make sure that they don't spend more than what we lay out in that budget. I know it's complex. I understand why people don't understand it, which I'm trying to simplify just in terms of dollars, how insane it is that in 2019 we spent 4.4 and now we're spending 7.3, and Republicans in control, President, Senate, House, are just having an amazingly difficult time bringing spending below $7 trillion. When I'm laying out very reasonable possibilities, I don't think Bill Clinton spent too little. We use his total outlays, inflate them for population growth, inflation. It's 5.5 trillion. That'd be a reasonable baseline to start from. Now, maybe you spent too little on defense. Okay, plus it up. You're still going to be well below $7 trillion. But again, this is going to need, and if President Trump's listening to us, President Trump, you have to lead. You have to understand the most important thing is to reduce spending. It's about reducing spending right now. If you want to get government under control, don't fund it to the extent we're funding it now. Spending, spending, spending. We don't have a revenue problem. We've got an awful tax code. I'd love to simplify and rationalize it. We have a spending problem. It's obvious it's a spending problem. There's an obvious way to return to a reasonable pre-pandemic baseline. But again, I've been preaching this since Wall Street Journal ran my op-ed on January 2nd this year. It's gaining some traction, but unfortunately, most of my colleagues say, oh, we can't do that. Can't do that. Can't do that.
Keep fighting, Senator. I know you have to step into a meeting. Thank you for explaining that for us. We do understand it a lot better than at least I did 10 minutes ago. I appreciate you very much. Come back soon. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.